Full staff crazy batch warning. Princess Changle, who is unparalleled in glory and favor, welcomes her fourth spring of life. Eunuch Xie Zhao, the first powerful minister of the Ming Dynasty. On the night of getting married, Changle laughed wildly in his bridal chamber and said, "Xie Zhao, you eunuch, are you worthy of touching this palace? Tonight is your last night, so go with peace of mind. If you have a good pregnancy in your next life, don't touch this palace again." Have you ever thought that the commander-in-chief had a hard command? Not only did he not die, but he also increasingly devoured Changle to death. When she looks for face, he kills. If she doesn't go home, he will come and tie it up. She poked a hole, and he made up for it. If Xie Zhao is the vengeful ghost who crawled back from hell, then Changle is the angel who accompanied Xie Zhao down. It's good to go to hell in both directions, isn't it? Intention. After a long separation and reunion, I will still like him. Keywords of the novel. Morbid Eunuch Pet without pop-ups, Morbid Eunuch Pet TXT Complete Collection Download, Morbid Eunuch Pet Latest Chapter Reading. Chapter 1. Changle Fourth Marriage. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1 Changle Fourth Marriage. Changle married 3 times, and on his wedding night, he killed 3 son-in-law in a row. This fourth grand wedding was still held with a grand celebration. Inside the lunar platform. The most luxurious princess mansion in Chang'an City is decorated with lights and colorful decorations, and crowds of servants bustle in and out like a fish in water. Changle sat in front of the dressing table, wearing a phoenix crown and a rosy robe. The copper mirror in front of her reflected her stunning beauty, with red lips and white teeth, and a small red mole at the end of her eyes, making her even more stunning and unparalleled. However, Changle's gaze was icy, and there was a subtle disgust towards the joyful attire on his body. "Your Highness, the auspicious time has arrived. It's time for us to set off." Daisher stood respectfully behind Changle, with a slightly mournful tone. Her well-maintained scallion fingers, like jade, were covered in vermilion like danku. She was playing board with the red cap she was about to cover, tossing it up and down, without any joy from the bride, as if waiting for her was the mouth of an abyss. Upon hearing this, Changle slowly stood up and waved away his desire to come forward and help her Shipa and maidservant. He only said lightly, "Don't even support this palace. This is the 4th time we are getting married. We need to go out of this palace ourselves. Let's not cover it for now, let's build it at the residence of Lord Xie." Changle let out a silent sigh and lamented, "I don't want to get married anymore in this palace. Why do the newlyweds have to pay respects before they can be considered married? We can't just take a nap together at night after everyone's eyes are right. It's good to get married in one step. Kill me with all the formalities." Jian Chui thought that Changle was worried that he would kill his new husband and become a widow again. She comforted him softly, "Your Highness, as the national teacher said, the governor's order is firm. You won't be a widow again this time." Changle walked ahead and sat in the wedding sedan without waiting for the groom who was coming over from behind. He lifted the curtain of the sedan and said to the 2 little maids who were concerned about her, "It's better to marry him than to be a widow." Xie Zhao came over to pick him up and heard Changle's words, as if he had stabbed him in the heart. Everyone walked in silence along the way, except for the deadly sound of the suona, which made Changle restless. Fengzhu and Longxiang, 5 generations of Qi Chang. Ritual completion. After bowing to heaven and earth, Xie Zhao traditionally greeted the imperial relatives and high-ranking ministers outside. Today, many real smiles appeared on his face, as if he had truly married his beloved. This marriage is just a joke after everyone's leisure time. A cruel and rampant eunuch and a widow who killed 3 husbands are ridiculous no matter how they look at it. However, the status of these 2 by people is increasingly prestigious, with eunuchs wielding power and princesses with unparalleled glory and favor. No one dares to gossip during the banquet. In the spacious and bright new house, Changle had already taken off his red hat and sat on the bed, bored and counting the stars. 999. Changle fixed her gaze and saw Xie Zhao standing at the door with arms in her arms, looking at her gently. Suddenly, she was a bit dazed. To be honest, this eunuch's leader is really handsome, with a sword-like silhouette, like a jade carving, but without femininity. He only makes people feel stunningly talented and charming. It's just a pity. Changle smiled and said coquettishly, "Why don't you call me the palace when you're here? I want to hear your highness count up to 9999. Xie Zhao's voice was very pleasant, like the sound of a high mountain flowing water on a chain. However beautiful the sound of a dead person is, it is useless. With this in mind, the smile on Changle's face gradually became real, and she shyly said, "Lord, we haven't had Hejin wine yet." Changle deliberately twisted her head and didn't look at Xie Zhao's expression. Xie Zhao chuckled lightly. For some reason, Changle took a hint of amusement from his smile and then frowned. Has the princess forgotten something? Changle thought he had been exposed and his expression was a bit out of control. Oh. What? Xie Zhao took 2 steps up to her side and suddenly leaned over to approach her face. Just as Changle thought this person was going to disrespect him, Xie Zhao lowered his voice in her ear and said, "Princess, the hood hasn't been lifted yet." After speaking, he pointed to Yu Rui on the table. Changle's face instantly turned from blue to red, and she was really dizzy. She then pursed her lips and smiled, waiting for Xie Zhao to cover her head again. Xie Zhao walked up to the Xie table and picked up Yu Rui. He glanced sideways and saw that the Xie candle next to him was bursting with double-core sparks. This was a good omen, a good symbol of unwavering love and kindness. His smile deepened in his eyes. The world of Changle has once again fallen into darkness. In the minute when Xie Zhao lifted his head, it seemed like there was a nail that was so long that he couldn't help but bury it and say, "Master, isn't your hand trembling?" As the words fell, a green jade Rui gently lifted the cover, and the expected light did not come. Xie Zhao's smile reached Changle's eyes, and before she could react, she held on to Changle's warm back neck with one hand, and a pair of thin lips came over to bully her. They parted at a touch. Rao is the first time that Changle has ever met such a disciple, as he has been married 3 times. Changle lowered his head and smiled, concealing his murderous intent. The governor is much more fun than the deceased husbands in this palace. He is really a wonderful person, he said. Xie Zhao heard his deceased husband's hand strike, and the anger in his eyes almost betrayed him. He walked slowly to the table and picked up the already poured Hejin wine, as if cherishing every moment in this world. He devoutly handed the wine glass to Changle, suppressing the emotions in his eyes and chuckling lightly, "The princess is even more wonderful." Ah, Zhao is ashamed. Who said it's not right? Changle lowered his eyes and smiled lightly. After drinking this glass of wine, he set off with peace of mind. There are already 3 deceased husbands, Changle doesn't mind killing another one. Both of them had a different color in their eyes, sitting together with their hands crossed, pouring all the wine from each other's hands into their mouths. In 15 minutes. Xie Zhao felt like he was being run over by an elephant all over his body, and his heart was pounding uncontrollably. Soon, his face was sweating profusely from enduring the intense pain. Changle saw Xie Zhao's current appearance and laughed recklessly. "Xie Zhao, you eunuch, you deserve to touch this palace. Tonight is your last night, so go with peace of mind. If you have a good pregnancy in your next life, don't touch this palace again." Changle stood up and smashed the phoenix crown heavily onto the ground, with an instant of pity in his eyes. It seemed like a pity that this priceless phoenix crown had been ruined, and it was as if pity for Xie Zhao's beautiful skin was about to disappear. Xie Zhao suddenly propped up a handsome face and forced a smile. "Today, on the day of our great celebration, the princess's words are inauspicious and should be applauded." Changle walked up to Xie Zhao, picked up his face with both hands, looked left and right, and said with pity, "It's a pity, such a beautiful face. The princess feels sorry for her minister, and she does not hesitate to die." Changle's face changed, and she walked back to the bed with her willow waist. Just as she was about to lie down with clothes and wait for tomorrow morning's show, she impatiently said, "There's so much to say if I'm going to die." As she finished speaking, her expression was quickly replaced by panic. Her body was burning like fire at this moment, with an unnatural blush on her face. Every inch of her bones seemed to be flaccid, and her body was covered in a dense itch. Changle uncontrollably pulled off his cumbersome wedding attire, quickly revealing his pink skin inside. Under the candlelight, his snowy skin was tinged with a hint of whiteness. Xie Zhao curled his lips and smiled, enduring the excruciating pain as he walked to the edge of the bed and pressed the blushing woman in front of him under his body, rubbing his big hands back and forth on her. Changle couldn't help but exhale, replaced by a surge of desire in his eyes. Xie Zhao was even more crazy, Royal Highness Princess. Changle tugged at her clothes and cursed, "It's so hot. It's so hot, Xie Zhao. You're a beast." She fiercely pinched her thigh, regaining her clarity for a moment, and roared, "This palace has given you the Northern Xinjiang heartbreak powder. Even if you can't live tonight, are you going to have a sex demon pregnancy? Don't let go of this palace yet." The overwhelming desire rushed towards Xie Zhao like waves, and he gasped for breath as he bit into Changle's ear and said, "Death under the peony flower, being a ghost is also charming. The hairpin rings fall, and the bells ring." Changle heard the man suppress his voice and call her nickname over and over again in a daze. But those who knew her nickname were all dead. A new article has opened. Daily update at 9 o'clock, end of this chapter. Chapter 2. Has this palace become a widow again? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Has this palace become a widow again the next day? Changle opened his eyes and was startled. The red tent of joy hung low in front of him, and there were fruits and red dates as big as a baby's fist on the table in the distance. Jiansui. Butterfly poetry. Jiansui's eyes were still slightly red, and she walked quickly over the door as if crying and swelling. She asked with concern, "Your Highness, is there anything uncomfortable with your body?" Changle's body was tingling with soreness, and his memory suddenly returned. She suppressed her surging emotions, gritted her teeth, but her eyes were shining. She looked at the two little maids with anticipation and said, "Tell this palace quickly, has this palace become a widow again?" This blasphemous remark made Dian Chui's heart skip a beat. Princess Changle has been used to arrogance since she was young, and her words are all amazing. "Your Highness, for now." "Not yet." Changle. Butterfly poetry didn't know whether to cry or laugh now. Her delicate little face twisted into a ball and said, "Consort, no, it's the governor waiting for you to have breakfast outside." With a hesitant expression. Changle stared blankly at the ceiling, then stood up and looked at the silhouette sitting upright outside. He said with a sorrowful expression, "It's 1,000 calculations, it's not even hard enough to count the governor's fate. The fate outside is hard for me." When I heard this, I curled my lips and smiled. How can I hold on to the present without a hard fate? Xie Zhao's voice echoed like a rock, "Princess, it's time to get up and tidy up. We still have to go and serve tea to the Empress and Empress today. We must not break the rules. If we have nothing to do in the future, we can sleep whatever we want in the mansion. There are many ears and eyes in the Xie mansion, and it's not easy to directly speak ill of each other in Changle." With a heart that disgusts Xie Zhao, she spoke in a delicate voice, saying, "My body is weak and unbearable today. Could you please bring Dian Chui to the palace to serve tea for me? Jiansui is my personal maid, she will feel at ease with the Emperor." Xie Zhao was taken aback by the words and thought it was because he had hurt her last night. A hint of guilt flashed across his eyebrows, and he stood up and said, "That princess should rest well. Jiansui and Daisher should stay here to serve you. There are no other maids in our mansion. It's also good." Xie Zhao took 2 steps out and retreated back. He walked to the bedside and carefully looked at Changle's face. After seeing that he was safe, he walked away with a big smile. After speaking, Changle turned over and wrapped himself in the robe handed over by Qi Shui, starting to tidy up. For the first time, after getting married, he had the opportunity to serve tea to his brother and sister-in-law. According to normal procedures, she should be crying today. When Jian Shui inserted a phoenix hairpin for Changle, she asked, "Princess, is it really appropriate not to serve tea?" Changle likes to brush his eyebrows and put on red makeup. At this moment, he is holding up his bronze mirror and applying cinnabar, and when he hears this, he smiles. This palace is meant to embarrass the emperor in front of him. Changle changed into a black and gold chest-length skirt, paired with a black sheer. It is embroidered with a vivid picture of the phoenix dance in the 9 heavens, which is extremely agile with her steps. It's like a noble little phoenix. Changle stood in front of the bronze mirror, turned around, and said with satisfaction, "Let's go and look at the North Tower." Wangbei Tower is the most famous men's-style museum in Chang'an City. The men inside are 1.1, and anyone you bring out is more beautiful than a woman. However, it is also a famous gold-selling kiln, and those who go there are either rich or expensive. Jiansui and Jieshi's expressions were both surprised. They didn't know about the fact that they drugged each other last night, but the red marks on Changle's body and the dampness on the blanket made them aware. In the Ming Dynasty, the customs were open and I knew that eunuchs had many different styles. I thought Changle was confused by the face of the new son-in-law, and I wanted to remind her, but the princess didn't seem to care. I even want to find 2 more. Jian Shui said, "Princess, isn't it a bit bad to go shopping at the Flower Tower on the first day of our wedding?" Changle smiled playfully and said, "Who said this palace is going to visit the Flower Tower? I used to care about this widow's identity, so it's not good to openly raise my face. Now who can still restrict this palace?" Butterfly poem, let Lao Luo drive the phoenix carriage of this palace to the front door. Previously, he used to sneakily drive a small car and walk through the back door like an affair. Today, it's the farmers who have turned around and started singing. Changle's golden phoenix carriage is extremely luxurious. 2 coachmen and 3 horses are needed to pull it, and the spacious carriage is covered with precious Persian carpets. The top of the carriage is also inlaid with a huge night pearl, and at the very bottom is a luxurious princess's bed that is just enough for one to lie down for a long time. It can be folded up and placed behind the carriage even if not lying down. There are mechanisms on both sides, which can be pressed to open the seats on both sides. Extremely luxurious, but also very eye-catching. As soon as her car left, it attracted onlookers who were curious and followed her all the way to the entrance of the North Tower. Everyone knows that Princess Changle, the national treasure of the Ming Dynasty, is getting married today on the 2nd day. So, I saw Changle expressionless as he got off the phoenix carriage, and an hour later, with a face full of spring, he brought out 5 exceptionally good-looking young men from Wangbei Tower. After she left, everyone couldn't recall for a long time. Some people reacted quickly and had already written the beginning of their conversation. In an instant, there was a rumor circulating in the city of Chang'an that Princess Chang'an and Lord Xie had a disharmonious life, which made the princess so angry that she brought 5 facial expressions home from the men's style pavilion in one breath. The emperor is the elder brother of Changle's mother, who dotes on Changle very much. Originally, she felt guilty towards Changle because of the gift of marriage. When she didn't come to offer tea, the emperor even smiled and waved his hand to reward him with many good things. As soon as Xie Zhao left the palace, he heard Shadow Guard 3rd Gung whispering in his ear about the whereabouts of Changle. San Gung lowered his head and dared not look at the master's expression. In the end, he bit and said, "Master, that's it. Now the people have been taken back to the mansion by the princess. The butler said that the princess has arranged a courtyard for each of them. Our mansion no longer has any extra courtyard. The princess said it's okay, and next time we pay the rent, we will send it to the Moonlight platform. The Moonlight platform can accommodate 20 rent. Speaking of the end, San Geng almost spoke with the sound of mosquitoes. Xie Zhao's handsome phoenix eyes were filled with raging anger, his fists unconsciously clenched, and several veins appeared on his neck. He stood still, gave himself 2 minutes to accept reality, and then said stubbornly, "Go back home." In the mansion, the sound of silk, bamboo, and chin intertwined, and there were bursts of laughter from women like silver bells. Xie Zhao stood at his doorstep, feeling lost for a moment, and then his eyes were filled with murderous intent. The third watch waited quietly behind him, grand and not daring to make a sound. San Geng secretly thought to himself, when did the Lord, who flipped his hand for the clouds and covered his hand for the rain in the hall, suffer from this kind of cowardice? Moreover, if the Lord came out 1 step late last night, even the divine doctor would be unable to save him. Princess Changle is still the first one who dares to openly accuse the Lord who has not died yet. Xie Zhao strode towards the courtyard. I saw 3 men dressed in single clothes, with their necks wide open, sitting around Changle, feeding her pastries to make her happy. In front of the court, a man was standing playing silk and bamboo, and one was sitting playing the guqin. Xie Zhao walked up to Changle and endured the raging anger. "Changle, are you happy to hit my face?" Changle frowned and buried the servant behind him, as if he had only just found out that Xie Zhao had returned. "Really, the governor has returned. Why don't you send someone to notify our palace?" Then he turned his head and smiled at Xie Zhaojiao, saying, "Lord, this palace is a princess, and according to the laws of the Ming Dynasty, one can maintain one's dignity. Would you mind that? Men should be more magnanimous, otherwise it won't be easy to please their loved ones." Changle's eyes wandered vaguely from the 5 graceful faces and said coquettishly, "This palace has just made the same mistake as women in the world. I just want to give these heartbroken boys who are in the mortal world a home." Xie Zhao seemed amused by Changle's words. "Then I'll go." Changle's well-controlled expression instantly tore apart. "I should have left last night." Xie Zhao. "Changle, it's illegal to murder your husband." Changle took the clear tea handed over by the young man in green and gently sipped it on his lips, saying, "Thank you, Lord. The law binds the weak, and this palace is not the weak." San Geng stood behind Xie Zhao with a suppressed smile, his face turning red. Then, Xie Zhao glanced over with an eye knife carrying ice shards and pulled out the long sword from San Geng's waist with one hand. Bang dang! In the midst of lightning and fire, a human head rumbled down to the ground, pitiful for the silk-blowing servant who still had a clear and beautiful appearance. Changle stood up with his heart pounding fiercely, shouting angrily, "Xie Zhao! You dare to harm the people in this palace too?" Xie Zhao sneered and casually threw away the bloody sword. He took 2 steps forward and pulled Changle out of the servant, embracing him. "Your Highness, I can close all the Nanfeng mansions in the city tomorrow. As many people as you come, I can kill you," he said. He gave a wicked smile, as if threatening, but Changle knew it wasn't, and Xie Zhao must be able to do it. "If someone dares to touch a hair on your head, I will punish him from the 9 clans. Changle struggled and rushed out of his arms, fiercely saying, "Why are you?" "Oh no! Oh no, I'm your husband." At this moment, a deputy dressed in black walked outside, and Changle's eyes narrowed slightly. This person was very familiar. At midnight, he walked over respectfully and knelt down. "Master, please take a step and speak." Xie Zhao was feeling annoyed and waved his hand, saying, "Just say it here." In the middle of the night, he frowned and whispered, "The National Academy has sent over the exam papers for this conference and asked us to take care of them." Xie Zhao said calmly, "Do as I said before, I will handle it on Mr. Pei's side." "Yes." Changle's expression changed, and he immediately turned around, pretending not to understand. He supported the willow waist and left with the servant. Xie Zhao's cold voice echoed behind Changle's ears. "Your Highness, if all the pets you don't want to keep are trapped in this house and die in vain, let them be released as soon as possible. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. One-Day Couple's 100-Day Grace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. One-Day Couple's 100-Day Grace. Changle quietly and resentfully dismissed the remaining 4 beauties and lay on the bed of the noble consort she had moved over from the moon platform. She held a black and gold fan and patted it haphazardly on her body. Her phoenix eyes narrowed slightly, and a piece of black gauze slipped off her body. The smooth snow shoulders were exposed, exuding an indescribable liveliness and fragrance. Humph! How powerful he is! This palace is not afraid. Isn't his fate hard? After passing the scientific examination, I can see how many lives he has enough to die. Jian Cui also angrily said, that's right. It turns out that the rumor that Master Xie is cruel and bloodthirsty is not unfounded. Butterfly Poetry responded quickly, Your Highness said that the supervisor mainly missed the topic. Changle sneered, I heard it from the Empress in this palace. This imperial examination was conducted by the East and West Factory to regulate the order of the examination room and prevent fraud. However, according to reason, how could the imperial examination papers be given to them in advance? I will write a letter to this palace, and Butterfly Poetry will be sent to the national teacher immediately. Jian Cui will follow me to the old residence of Peigu. At the old residence of Peigu, Xie Zhao stood in front of this octogenarian, wrapped in a chill, like sharp ice in the cold of spring. Pai Xiaoro pushed 300 exam papers to the elderly person's desk without a smile. Mr. Pei, this may not be appropriate. General Peigu threw away his oriental reading glasses on his face and said, Master Xie, someone has already sent the test paper to you during the day. What do you mean by returning it to me now? Xie Zhao said, I don't want to play Tai Chi with Zhao anymore. Maybe the test papers are not just given to my factory. If the situation is serious, I won't be afraid of not protecting the people's day in my later years. Peigu smiled nonchalantly and said, what the supervisor means is that the content of this test paper has already leaked out. The old man in the attic doesn't shed tears until he sees the coffin. Third watch, take out the intercepted test paper. Xie Zhao took the sealed paper bag that had already been opened and threw it on the table. Master Gu, do you remember? Seeing the familiar paper bag, Mr. Pei Ji's face changed and he finally asked coldly, this is not related to your East Factory. What are you meddling in? There is someone special in this year's scientific examination. Suddenly, there were faint footsteps coming from the outer courtyard, and the delicate and crisp voice of the woman sounded, who dares to make mistakes in the scientific examination in this palace? Changle walked over and said coldly, Mr. Pei, you are also a great scholar in the Hanlin. You have been studying hard for decades just to make wedding clothes for others. Pei Ji's old face shed 2 lines of clear tears as he murmured, my relatives are in power. What laws do I have? Xie Zhao looked at Changle with some surprise, his eyes softened and his tone became calm. Zhao came today to solve this matter, he said Peigu Lao. Oh. How can we solve it? Cui Xiang has already received the question. Xie Zhao leaned over to the old man's ear and whispered a few words, and the dim eyes of the octogenarian in front of him suddenly shone brightly. Changle frowned and saw the 2 of them looking unhappy, saying, Your Highness, is this how we guard our palace? At least our husband and wife will be grateful for 100 days a day. Xie Zhao looked up at Changle's round apricot eyes and smiled gently, Your Highness will know about the imperial examination in the future. Changle came today to explore the reputation of Elder Peigu, but unexpectedly, Xie Zhao was also here. He looked like he really needed help, so he didn't want to delve deeper. He stretched lazily and walked outside, then the palace will wait for the day after tomorrow. I'll bid farewell to the old man. Xie Zhao quickly caught up with Changle's kitten step, grabbed her hand, and asked, Your Highness, how did you come in without reporting? Changle shook off Xie Zhao's hand and looked at him like a fool. Here, do you see the wall with the Buddha sign hanging on it? Our palace is climbing over the wall and entering. Changle narrowed his eyes and smiled, very cunning during special times. Jiansui's face behind her blushed so much that it was almost bleeding, and she gently pulled on Changle's black veil. Your Highness, don't say such words outside next time. Changle snorted coldly as if disdainful, this world belongs to my oldly family. Is it the royal land in the world? Wherever and how I go to this palace, it should be based on my happiness. Immediately raising his eyebrows, he looked at Xie Zhao and said, however, today, the governor has asked this palace to take a high look. Xie Zhao chuckled, his voice was like a rock, can your Highness Royal Highness Princess accompany you to dinner? Changle just wanted to refuse with righteousness and strictness. Her stomach let out a very unpleasant, gurgling sound, and she turned her face away to look at the grass on the roadside. It's not impossible, my palace will condescend to accompany you once. Xie Zhao smiled even gentler, and as he looked at Changle, his eyes sparkled with starlight. I took the princess on horseback to the outskirts to eat a delicious local kiln chicken, he said. Changle frowned and wanted to insult someone. He even went to the wilderness to eat wild vegetables, and his apricot eyes met Xie Zhao's smiling phoenix eyes with a hint of anger. She lost consciousness for a moment. The bright and clean young man once looked down at her with a smile on his face, his sparkling eyes filled with her reflection. I'll take the palace to the outskirts to eat a delicious local kiln chicken, he said. Their appearances gradually overlapped in Changle's eyes. Changle shook his head. No, it's not right. How could it be possible? He has been dead for 10 years. Apart from their appearance, there is no resemblance between the two. Xie Zhao asked with concern, what's wrong? Changle Guaner, let's go. Your words have piqued the interest of our palace. Xie Zhao smiled sideways and blew a whistle with one hand. The black steed galloped towards the corner of the street. Even Changle, who had been accustomed to seeing good things since childhood, couldn't help but marvel. The carriage on the mountain road is inconvenient. Your Highness, please hold on to me tightly. Xie Zhao, are you reincarnated? Run slowly. Lijia village on the outskirts of Chang'an. Changle slowly climbed down from the horse with a willow-like waist, and her voice was about to burst along the way. However, the person in front of her rushed forward and accelerated like a madman. The phoenix bike she usually sits on has 3 floors inside and 3 floors outside, with shock absorbers installed on the ground. Little did she know that riding a horse up the mountain feels like this. It seems quite exciting. Especially the mountain breeze blowing head-on carries the fragrance of flowers, coupled with the jolting of the horse, there is a distorted feeling. Changle exhaled a clear breath and his face looked better. He asked, where is the kiln chicken? Xie Zhao thought that this journey had frightened Changle, and there was a hint of self-blame between his eyebrows. Your Highness, don't you blame me for taking you to the countryside for a meal on horseback. Changle chuckled and said, it's quite fun. Let's go, this palace is hungry. As she walked further into the mountains, Changle felt more familiar until she reached the doorstep of a farmer and almost shouted, Aunt Li. Xie Zhao took the lead and said, Aunt Li, is the kiln chicken I ordered ready? The aunt, dressed in gray and black patched cloth, looked at them with a simple smile and said, the governor is here. Please take a seat and bring it to you immediately. Auntie then took 2 steps forward and smiled knowingly as she looked at the girl next to Xie Zhao with a peach blossom-like face. This is the lady of the governor, right? Changle immediately waved his hand and said, I'm not a lady, I'm just a friend of the Lord. Changle breathed a sigh of relief as he saw that Aunt Li no longer remembered him, and smiled at her. Then he sat down on the small wooden stool he had set up at the entrance of the courtyard, showing no signs of disdain, and carefully scrutinized the plants and trees here, looking very curious. The fragrant kiln chicken was brought to the table, and with a delicate knife, the chicken wrapped in lotus leaves was exposed with a single stroke, smelling fresh and fragrant. Xie Zhao washed his hands and tore the chicken for Changle. Soon, a chicken was torn to the bone rack by him, and Changle's plate was piled with small mountain-high meat. Changle suddenly felt a little embarrassed and gently flicked his ear hair back, whispering, "They've all been placed in the bowl of this palace. What are you eating?" "You." Xie Zhao knew he had made a slip of the tongue and immediately changed his tone, "I like to chew on bones." Xie Zhao slowly nibbled on the meat around the skeleton, then occasionally looked up at the girl who was eating meat seriously, her eyes filled with tenderness. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. You care a lot, so I'll take care of it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. You care a lot, so I'll take care of it. At the entrance of the Imperial Academy. When the sky had just turned pale, a large number of candidates had already gathered at the entrance, reading books under the dim light or standing under the eaves reciting. At a moment's notice, the fans of the East Factory appeared at the entrance of the Imperial Academy, and San Geng led his team into the room, preparing to inspect the examination room again. Xie Zhao walked at the end of the team, dressed in a red flying fish suit with a golden waist belt, and a large black and golden sword at his waist. His expression was faint, and his features were as deep as those of a knife, looking calm and imposing. The third watch stood in front of the steps and reported. "Master, Chen Zhegang just sent 3 cars of steamed stuffed buns, mantou and soybean milk. He said that his daughter Law made them overnight. I have the right to console the examinees. Do you want to send them?" Xie Zhaofeng narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "Chen family, Chen Sheng. Did the household make a fortune by selling rice due to the natural disaster 2 years ago?" "Exactly. Send it out." Just then, a commotion rang out outside. Students, Princess Changle thanked everyone for studying hard for more than 10 years, and prepared a morning tea dim sum for everyone. "It's not expensive, but it's better than your heart. Please line up and show your admission card behind me to get it." Daisher shouted loudly at the entrance of the college. The crowd instantly became agitated. "Princess! Has the princess come yet? Is Princess Changle the one who married Lord Xie? Is the princess on the carriage? I really want to see her true face. Changle is not wearing any makeup today. She is wearing a black, gold-trimmed plain robe with a simple woman's bun and a wooden hairpin on her head, which looks very elegant." Changle slowly walked out of the phoenix carriage. The originally noisy crowd instantly felt like a silent note had been pasted, and no one spoke loudly anymore. She smiled and walked to the table where the tea snacks were distributed, handing them to everyone one by one with her own hands. She changed her usual aggressive demeanor, but it surprised Xie Zhao standing at the entrance of the Imperial Academy. The third watch frowned, "Princess, why are you crazy? Is our steamed bun deep-fried dough sticks still hair?" Xie Zhao's eyes flashed with a hint of cunning, and he curled his lips and smiled, "Hair, give it to the brothers to eat seriously." Gu Jusi stood on the side of the road and carefully opened the tea bag sent by the princess. He was surprised. In the 3 layers of exquisite and small pear wood food box, the first layer was packed with 4 petal-shaped cakes, and the second layer was still steaming beef xiaobing, baked cake in griddle. The bottom layer is a crimson bookmark, and the words he received are "Winning at the beginning." Gu Jusi suddenly remembered that his parents and sister at home couldn't help but have a sour look in their eyes. They walked across from Changle, who was stretching lazily, carrying a box, but were stopped by guards. He smiled indifferently and bowed deeply to Changle 3 times, "Thank you for the princess's tea." Changle smiled gently and said, "All things are inferior, only reading is high. Come on." "Definitely. Your Highness, don't you have a husband?" Xie Zhao looked at Changle eagerly. Changle saw the appearance of the evil god and said displeased, "Go eat your steamed buns." Xie Zhao's inner thoughts. "Great, I don't want to be ashamed. No, I'm going to eat what you gave me. Isn't there still a few boxes left? Changle snorted coldly, that's for the candidates. Is the supervisor also a candidate? Xie Zhao curled his lips and smiled, if your highness likes the top scorer, I can give it a try. A man with a smooth tongue is not good. The chief examiner Pei Galao, Song Taifu, and others all arrived at the examination room, and Li Gonggang was sent by the palace. He stood at the entrance of the Imperial Academy and shouted with a sharp voice, time has arrived. Candidates are requested to sign in immediately and complete a personal search. Candidates are not allowed to bring any items into the examination room. The pens, ink, paper, and inkstones for this exam will be provided by Shufangzhai. The joyful atmosphere originally stirred up by Changle was instantly brought back to reality by the eunuch's loud voice, and everyone's expression was stern, even the queue was extremely serious. Changle sat in a courtyard just a wall away from the exam room, the sun shining on her and making her drowsy. She listened to the rustling sound of wolf hair pen tips rubbing against rice paper, like a grand lullaby, and unconsciously fell into a deep sleep. Xie Zhao saw this scene after patrolling the examination room. He curled his lips and smiled, wrapping his cloak around Changle's thin body. I don't know how long I slept, but I heard the noise outside. Changle suddenly opened her eyes and coldly realized that Xie Zhao's clothes were covering her body. The official robe of the second-rank officer was draped over her legs, and the hem was dragged to the ground. When she picked it up, it was covered in a layer of dust. Changle looked away with disdain and stood up, stretching lazily. Daisher, have you finished the exam inside? Daisher frowned slightly and said, I have finished the exam, but Jing Zhaoyin brought someone over and said someone reported the supervisor to leak the answer. The inside is currently being searched. Changle walked towards the exam room without hesitation, with a small face covered in frost. Everyone stood up in the examination room, and the Jin Wei was inspecting each table one by one. Jing Zhaoyi was missing 10 more people to search for themselves, and it took an hour to do so. After searching, everyone's faces were a bit awkward, especially Jing Zhaoyi's face was sweating profusely. He awkwardly stroked his wet beard and said, Lord, someone must have intentionally slandered me. I will go back and arrest the culprit who reported the case and interrogate him. After speaking, he rushed towards the door like applying oil on the soles of his feet. Xie Zhao gave a glance and let Fanzi catch the person. He slowly walked up to Jing Zhaoyi with his long legs and said, Your Excellency, is this thing? Xie Zhao took out 7 or 8 small notes from his belt and handed them to Jing Zhaoyi. It's not really defamation. Xie Zhao has a beautiful voice and a flawless face, like a person in a painting. Jing Zhaoyi had already knelt down on his own, and he trembled and said, Governor, there must be some misunderstanding here. Oh. Misunderstanding. Chen Sheng. Xie Zhao looked disdainfully at the person crawling at his feet and said, Chen Sheng, Jing Zhaoyi is here. I believe that Jing Zhaoyi will definitely be able to repay your innocence. Can you explain it to me? Chen Sheng trembled and said, Your Excellency, my wife was caught overnight by criminals, forcing me to put all the plastic-wrapped paper strips into the food given to the students and send them over. Fortunately, Lord Yingming did not distribute the food. Otherwise, the consequences are really unimaginable. Changle, however, walked in for an unknown amount of time. She raised her eyebrows and asked, Chen Sheng, you've recruited everything now. What will your wife do? Chen Sheng smiled foolishly and pointed to a middle-aged woman behind him, saying, Thank you, Commander. With your vast and divine abilities, you have already retrieved the person in less than 2 hours. Changle, however, did not believe this person's words, but with all the evidence and physical evidence available, she could not rely on anyone. However, she was still curious and casually said, Governor, come back as soon as you finish your official duties. After speaking, he gave Xie Zhao an ambiguous look in his eyes. Waiting for you to have dinner. As night falls, Colorful lights shine brightly, and the early autumn wind cools down on one's body. Xie Zhao walked into the mansion with a cold wind on his body, but a warm smile on his face made him shiver at night. He once suspected that Changle had drugged him, and he was still the most poisonous emotional poison in southern Xinjiang. Master, isn't this the Hongmen banquet set up by the princess? San Geng was a bit worried. After all, on the night of getting married, he had given his master a heartbreak. Thinking about the fate of Changle's widow is really hard to think about. Xie Zhao, however, seemed unhappy and said, "Shut up, can you please treat me well?" There is a spacious 8 immortals table in Changle courtyard, filled with exquisite dishes of various colors. It was made by Changle with 20 private chefs, which is both luxurious and extravagant. Xie Zhao walked in with a faint moonlight, somewhat surprised by Changle's intentions. "Your Highness, it's really frustrating for me." As he approached and took a closer look, the table was filled with things he didn't eat. He doesn't eat pork, the table is filled with pork, and he doesn't like sweet treats, but there are all kinds of small desserts on the table. Xie Zhao. I put my heart into it. Changle picked up a pink osmanthus cake and chuckled, "Your Highness, come and sit down quickly." Xie Zhaogang's still warm smile seemed a bit out of control. "It's not hard, my family's fate is hard," he said. Changle looked at Xie Zhao with a smiling face and said, "Try it quickly. These are all cooked by the chefs in our palace online nationwide. They are delicious, and you are fortunate." Xie Zhao's hand under the robe was clenched with veins, but she couldn't say anything to her watery phoenix eyes. After all, this is their first meal together since getting married. He didn't want to disappoint her, so he had to grit his teeth and pick up 2 pieces of cold pork ear. Changle seemed to be in high spirits and frantically filled his bowl with vegetables, then handed him a sweet-looking white pastry. Xie Zhao only took 1 bite and almost vomited all of it. "This is not pastry. This is clearly a lump made of white sugar." Xie Zhao pretended to be calm and composed, and after finishing his meal, he commented, "The master who can make white sugar so much like a pastry is really a genius. He deserves a reward." Changle laughed so hard that his mouth couldn't even close. No one saw her hand hidden under the square table turning red. "If it's delicious, then eat more. There are so many packages to give to your subordinates to try. If you like this palace, you can ask the chef to cook for you every day." Watching Xie Zhao silently chewing, Changle was lacking in interest and had to take a few bites of small dishes before being called off. "What's going on today? What kind of cannon fodder is Chen Sheng?" she said with a slight change in her eye. Xie Zhao finally stopped acting and almost shed tears, but Changle's problems became more and more tricky. It is obviously unrealistic to have another question even though the previous day's question has been leaked. How can we ensure fairness? Changle's eyes narrowed slightly and he said, "Are you still playing tricks on your back in this palace?" Xie Zhao picked up the high-quality huajia wine next to him and poured it into his own cup. After drinking 3 cups of wine, he finally managed to dissipate the scorching taste in his throat. "How dare I play tricks under your highness's eyelids? It's just a reminder from a friend in court." Changle Feng's eyes narrowed slightly. "Friend?" But she didn't seem to want to care about the court. "Answer the questions from this palace, don't disturb the audience." Xie Zhaoguan said, "Your wife is satisfied with your answer. Can you kiss me?" Bang dang. Sangeng, who was hiding in a tree to protect his master, fell from the tree. Xie Zhaofeng's eyes were slightly angry and had already arranged for a candidate to brush horses for the next month. Changle smiled coquettishly and said, "I heard that a master of poison in the western regions is about to enter the capital soon. I even invited him to discuss how to improve his poison-making skills together." Xie Zhao snorted coldly and said, "I'll let him never come back." Then he said seriously, "There is one person in this scientific examination who is the son-in-law that the Zhang family values. He has a high regard for himself and is quite talented, but unfortunately, his family background is too poor. If the Zhang family wants to win this person over as a chess piece by marrying a daughter, they will naturally wish him success in battle. However, in terms of true talent and practical learning, he may not necessarily fall behind, but the Zhang family insists on him becoming the top scorer to force Mr. Pei Gu to give up the topic. Xie Zhao seemed to be reminiscing, his gaze somewhat relaxed. Actually, I didn't want to intervene in this matter. The water in the court was too muddy. Opening one eye and closing the other was the way to become an official. But the day before yesterday, I clearly felt that you were very concerned about the scientific examination, so I went to take care of it. That's why today's farce is happening. The Zhang family is beating me. Xie Zhao helped his forehead and chuckled self-deprecatingly. Changle was stunned, but no one in the court knew that Xie Zhao was a sycophant. In order to rise to power, he resorted to any means possible, and behind every division of power he held, he carried the blood of the heavens. But it was this cunning sycophant who whispered in front of her, "You care a lot, I'll take care of it." Changle's heart seemed to be shattered. Perhaps some people are not what others say they are. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. She says I'm dirty. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. She says I'm dirty. The night breeze rises again, and the coolness lingers. The shadows of trees sway freely with the wind, making a resounding sound. Between the blooming night flowers and the weeds that grow close to the ground, there is a faint sound of insect chirping, which extends endlessly and sounds pleasant. Xie Zhao sat in the courtyard, holding on to Changle's lotus arm and earnestly asked, "Your Highness has never been concerned about the affairs of the previous dynasty. Why is it that you are so serious about the scientific examination? Is there your Highness's beloved among them? If there really is a crush," if Xie Zhao didn't speak, "then I'll go slaughter overnight." Changle's expression is rare to be so real, without the usual exaggerated tenderness. With a plain face and eyes gazing far into the sky, she said, "For a long time, there is an old friend in this palace. He taught me to be sensible, to know how to advance and retreat, and to understand hardships. It was he who made me want to respect scholars and those who dare to speak up in this era for the first time. Later, he left." Xie Zhao didn't know why, but his heart was pricked by a row of needles, causing a dense and continuous pain. Xie Zhao asked softly, "Do you like him?" Changle, on the other hand, regained his senses and mocked himself, "Those who care about our palace will all die, so what's the use of liking or not? It's his lack of fortune." Xie Zhao spoke softly, and Yaqing's eyes were filled with guilt. Xie Zhao wanted to shift the topic. He didn't want to see his princess sulking. "Princess, can my husband go to bed tonight? The bed board in the courtyard is really hard." When he said this, Changle remembered that the two had already gotten married, but Changle didn't want Xie Zhao to live with her. She felt dirty. The eunuch was dirty. Changle's expression became normal and lively, and he got up before leaving. "The bed in the palace is soft, you can go to the palace to sleep," he said. Xie Zhao grabbed Changle's arm and Changle let out a painful hiss. A hint of panic flashed in his eyes. "Your Highness, do you think the house is dirty?" Changle rubbed his wrist, which he had pulled hard on, and said in annoyance, "Yes. This palace just despises you for being dirty." Xie Zhao's green eyes dimmed instantly, and his mind was filled with the memories of just entering the deep palace. He knew he was dirty and had turned him into a person he both knew and despised. He should not stand in the abyss and attempt to capture the moon. "Ah Zhao, I understand." The next morning, Xie Zhao received a message from the butler. "Butler." The princess led a team of people to the Lishan palace early in the morning and said they were going to escape the heat. Xie Zhao sat in the study all night, with waves of darkness in his eyes. He smiled self-deprecatingly and looked out at the fallen leaves blowing in the autumn wind. Taking shelter from the summer. "It's about avoiding me," he said. San Gung was punished to stay at the racetrack all night last night, and just as he walked over to prepare to serve Xie Zhao, he heard this conversation. After he left, what unspeakable things happened afterwards. But business matters, Sangying said seriously, Master, the Zhang family has come to deliver a message inviting you to a small gathering tonight. Xie Zhao sat in the shadow, his expression dim and unclear. Okay. The mountains are stacked with peaks, rising from green, and white mist curls up. The milky white thick mist wraps around like a ribbon. Changle, wearing only a red belly bag and a pair of lantern pants under it, comfortably immersed himself in the hot springs of the Lishan Palace. A satisfied expression appeared on his face, and the sound of silk and bamboo in his ears was like a fairyland on earth. The Lishan Palace is said to be used by the royal family for summer vacation, but in fact, only Changle knows that the natural hot springs inside are treasures. She is a person who knows how to enjoy herself. She has been living a luxurious life since childhood, and has received the support of people from all over the world. She has never known what suffering is. There is no traditional female concept of prioritizing one's husband, so her affairs should revolve around her. Changle was a bit tired from soaking, and she slowly propped herself up and sat on the shore, her legs rhythmically swinging up and down, splashing water. The servant next to her quickly brought her a brand new cotton robe, afraid that she might freeze. Don't play such a sad song, it's like turning my palace into a widow again. Changle pursed his lips in displeasure and muttered, but becoming a widow is also good. At least you can stay on the platform to avoid being ridiculed by people all over the world every day in this palace. Sitting next to him, Dongshan Jun stopped his movements and looked devoutly at the delicate princess in front of him. He softly said, "What kind of music does the princess like?" Dongshan immediately went to learn. Take a look, this is the difference between spending money and flipping stickers. Someone always smiles at her for the sake of Qian Jinbo. Dongshan Jun was a newly bought waiter from the North Tower that she visited a few days ago. She was handsome and had a good conversation and even wrote a good erotic poem, which made Changle blush just by looking at her. But it's just a look. Changle is both fun and extravagant, but she has never been enlightened by the relationship between men and women. She has always had a lonely grave in her heart. Changle stood up and wrapped himself in a thick robe, then said with a smile, "This palace likes Zhou Yu and Zhou Gongzi. Have you ever heard of his Guan Shan Yu? Dongshan Jun suppressed his smile and suddenly turned positive. He walked to the low stool by the rock and sat down, burning incense and playing the guqin. A melodious and healthy sound of the piano came, and Changle slowly followed the sound, with countless brilliance flowing in his eyes. Chu Zhong. Dongshan looked eagerly at Changle and said, "Your Highness, how is it?" Changle walked away without looking back, and for a long time a seductive female voice came, "It's okay. But it's not as good as the original version by a tenth or two." Changle supported the willow waist as she walked, and the light around her grew darker and darker. There were no footsteps behind her. She instantly became alert and shouted, "Where are people?" Donghua Jun Gensue, butterfly poetry. Changle caressed his chest, feeling uneasy in his heart. A figure slowly emerged from the darkness. He was hidden in the shadow and could not see his face clearly. "Royal Highness Princess, I'm sorry to offend you." Changle remained calm and didn't show any signs of timidity. "Who are you?" The person in the shadow took 2 steps forward, allowing Changle to see his ferocious appearance clearly. The person in front of him was dressed in thick clothes, but his body was straight and his face was covered in pockmarked wounds. One of his eyes had an empty hole, only an endless darkness. He said hoarsely, "I'll make a bet with the princess. What if your husband, who is naturally cold, comes to save you? My palace has disappeared, and the whole country is coming to save me. Why gamble on him?" Ha ha ha. The man in front of him, who was gloomy, laughed even more eerily in the darkness. "If you want to blame him, then blame him for not killing him. I'll have to take revenge." Changle's willow eyebrows twisted and he angrily rebuked, "Why do you have a grudge against him and come to harm this palace? What does this palace have to do with him? Do you know the consequences of kidnapping this palace? I am Wei Jinghua, the legitimate son of the Duke of Wei. Your husband has caused me so much trouble. I was expelled from the family genealogy 1 second ago, and the next second he tied me up and executed me without authorization. Look at my eyes, they were cut out alive by him holding a blazing red dagger. What am I guilty of? Changle started screaming as he listened more and more wrongly. Although she was charming, she had never seen these darkness before, and then she was knocked unconscious by someone behind her and taken away. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. The Princess is Kidnapped. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. The Princess is Kidnapped. On this side, Jian Chui, who had not yet waited for the princess to come out, was a bit anxious when she heard screams coming from inside and immediately ran in. But it's already late. The bodies of 3 guards and maids were lying horizontally in the middle of the hall, with a note beside them. There was an address written crookedly on it, and it was mentioned that at the 3rd quarter of the hour of Mao, Xie Zhao came alone, with 1 more person. The princess died. Jian Chui burst into tears of displeasure, and dared not delay. She immediately followed the guards back to Xie Mansion to bring in reinforcements. Xie Zhao had just drunk a jar of wine, and then heard a report from a fan about Changle. Before leaving, he went to Wangbei Tower to pick up a young servant and went to the palace chatting and laughing together. He was so angry that he spent the whole day dancing swords here. Governor! Governor! It's not good. Jian Sui ran all the way to Xie Zhao's yard with red eyes, sobbing, "The princess has been kidnapped." Upon hearing this, Xie Zhao let go of his strength, and the cold sword, with its blade still shining with silver, fell so hard. What? Please explain it clearly. Jian Chui handed him the note, and Xie Zhao fixed his gaze and frowned, saying, "Jian Chui, let San Gung take my token to the East Factory and bring 3 teams of people over. Go immediately." The heart hanging from Jian Chui seemed to have a backbone immediately. He had intended to go to the palace to report to the emperor, but he was in a hurry to take power and could not quench his thirst. In the damp and dilapidated temple, Changle curled up and slowly woke up. The cotton jacket on her body was gone, leaving only a damp belly pocket, and her lower body was also wet. The silk pants were tightly pressed against her thighs and buttocks, creating a full and enticing curve. But her throat was hoarse, and she had a high fever from catching a cold. Her whole body was scorching hot. But she felt colder and colder, and as the wind blew through the window of the dilapidated temple, she would tremble 3 times. Wei Jinghua is already lascivious. When I see her like this, why bother with her status, dignity, and shame? He dared to hijack Changle, but he never thought he could go back alive. Accustomed to being a lazy playboy, he was suddenly taken aback and couldn't survive. Wei Jinghua rubbed his hands and saw Changle's flushed little face with a narrowed expression. Xie Zhao, a eunuch, is also trying to pick the moon. You really envy us. Even though we are widows, such charm is unmatched by ordinary women. Changle feels dizzy and heavy. But also keenly aware of what the man in front of her was going to do to her, the royal aura erupted at this moment. If you dare to disrespect this palace, the emperor will definitely peel your skin. Once again, I will execute your entire Wei family. Do you still want to bring your 70-year-old father with you when you die? Father in his 70s. It seemed like a knife plunged into Wei Jinghua's heart, and his eyes turned red. When they abandoned me like my shoes without any reason, no one cared about me, he said, no one. It's you, little girl. I'll tell you the true face of that eunuch husband today. Do you know what he first did in the palace? Changle doesn't want to know these things now, but she must procrastinate and wait for rescue. She silently prays in her heart, isn't it the heavenly Sha Lone Star? Hurry up and kill this person. Isn't he a eunuch when he enters the palace? Chang Li's face showed confusion. Wei Jinghua snorted coldly and said, "Yes, eunuch. Other eunuchs are only 7 or 8 years old when they enter the palace. He's already 18 years old when he enters the palace. He served the concubines of the cold palace all the way to the empress. Do you know how long it took him? 1 year. Ha ha ha, the things he plays with are not ordinary flowers. He has fascinated the concubines in the harem who have never seen a man before, which is why he has his current position. He not only steps on blood, but also on people's hearts." Changle, however, was confused. Yesterday he said he was dirty, was he wrong? Wei Jinghua continued to murmur in her ear, "You are just his help in reaching the summit. Otherwise, wouldn't it be good for him to marry a good family girl? He's rushing to marry a widow like you, who is a coward to his husband." Changle was furious and said, "Enough. No matter how dirty he is also my husband. He is also the son-in-law of the Ming Dynasty who has ancestral documents. I can't tolerate your evaluation in plain clothes." Wei Jinghua lost the nature of chatting with her and bullied her, pressing his body against her. He was about to use his big hand to untie the delicate strap on the beauty's back when the door was forcefully kicked open. At a moment's notice, Xie Zhao stood alone in front of the temple, with a broken Buddha statue as if paying homage to him. His face was fierce, devoid of the warmth of the past, as if this was him. "Wei Jinghua. I shouldn't have saved your life from the beginning." Wei Jinghua smiled and said, "The retribution is mutual. I didn't expect you would really come alone for this widow in the middle of the night." He turned his head to look at Changle on the ground, his eyes ambiguous, and said, "Look, I guessed it right. If he has you in his heart, he will lose." Xie Zhao took 2 steps forward to protect Changle, but was stopped by Wei Jinghua with a knife. "How do you want to let someone go?" Wei Jinghua held the knife and laughed wildly. "How did you torment me back then? Today, let's demonstrate it in front of your beloved. First, gouge out my eyes. Left or right?" Wei Jinghua laughed wildly and said, "Just like me, with my left eye." Xie Zhao nodded, took the burning dagger handed over by Wei Jinghua, and was about to stab it into his eyes. The tip of the knife was less than a finger away from his eyelids, and he saw the blade about to pierce his narrow phoenix eyes. Changle, however, was about to go crazy first. For some reason, her heart was beating like a drum, and she was frantically grinding the hemp rope that bound her hand with a stone. The hemp rope was cut off, and her wrist was now bleeding profusely, revealing a forest of white bones. Changle roared angrily, "Xie Zhao, you should gouge out your eyes just because of a person's words. I, Changle, will look down on you for the rest of my life." She felt as if she couldn't feel any pain, and even picked up the big stone with her half-broken wrist and hit Wei Jinghua's knee. Wei Jinghua fell to the ground in an instant, and Xie Zhao immediately reacted. Just as the dagger touched his eyelids and cut a blood hole, he flipped his wrist in the opposite direction and stabbed Wei Jinghua's neck. One blow, death. This coordination can be considered perfect. Xie Zhao, however, was not at all happy because his beauty fainted directly in his arms. Her hands were still bleeding profusely. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Chess Pieces. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7 Chess Pieces. Nurturing or not teaching is a father's fault. Xie Zhao wrapped Changle tightly in his broad outer robe, and the gentle light in his eyes faded away. He sternly said, "Copy the Wei family." In the middle of the night, he took 2 steps forward and bowed his hand to command, "Yes." Jian Cui is still kneeling outside. After all, she didn't take good care of the princess today, and it is inevitable that she will die to avoid it. Xie Zhao's gaze only swept lightly towards her, although he didn't say anything. It made Jian Cui's whole body tremble unconsciously. The pure white veil enveloped the jade-like beauty on the bed and couch. Her willow eyebrows furrowed slightly and she slowly opened a pair of round apricot eyes. After realizing it, Changle felt the suffocating pain coming from her wrist. She took a deep breath and said, "Butterfly poetry, Jiansui, water, thirst." Jian Chui was waiting by the side, excitedly carrying warm water and running to the bedside. "Your Highness, where do you feel uncomfortable in your body?" Daisha wiped away her tears and said, "Your Highness, you don't know that we've been scared to death lately." Changle gulped down a large glass of water before feeling his throat better. "My palace is lucky, isn't this okay? Wake up." Xie Zhao walked in from the outside, looking concerned. Changle, however, did not welcome Xie Zhao. After all, it was all because of him that she suffered this calamity. She said with a cold face, "Look at this palace, the fate chart of this heavenly Sha Lone Star may need to be replaced by someone else. In terms of conquering people, the governor is more powerful than this palace." Daisha and Jiansui actually want to say something. The princess has been unconscious for the past 3 days, and the governor has been taking care of her without any clothes on. She is even more careful than those who work as servants, and everyone has noticed that the governor seems to have a deep affection for the princess. But when the words reached my throat, I couldn't say anything. Changle didn't know these things and continued to criticize, "After marrying you, I haven't encountered any good things in my palace. The governor should stay away from my palace. My palace is not as tough as the governor." Xie Zhao's green eyes only looked at the blue marble floor tiles, filled with self-blame and inferiority. His throat seemed to be blocked by a huge stone. "Does your highness regret marrying Zhao?" I don't know where this sentence pierced Changle's eyes, but she suddenly became angry and forcefully smashed the glass in her hand toward Xie Zhao's forehead. Bang dang! A loud sound of glass colliding with bones and then falling and shattering echoed in this spacious room. Xie Zhao's forehead was smashed and swollen and torn, emitting crimson blood. Changle looked at his current appearance, and the nameless flame seemed to be extinguished in an instant. His heart was still in pain, it must be in a daze. "I have no regrets, do you believe me?" Changle sneered. Xie Zhao said in a hoarse voice, "I don't believe it." San Gung, however, was not worth it for his own master. He stood at the door and loudly reported, "Master, Miss Xie Shuren, the legitimate daughter of the Xie family, requests to see you." He then added loudly, "Miss Xie has been waiting for you for 4 hours. Miss Xie has not yet left the cabinet. She has been staying in our mansion for a long time or has a bad reputation for her." Governor. Xie Zhao suddenly remembered that the crown prince was about to select a concubine, and Xie Shuren was the chess piece he was planning to bury in the crown prince's mansion. Xie Zhao turned around and left with great strides, as if fleeing in despair. Changle seemed to have no peace of mind about this matter and simply said, "In the afternoon, I will go into the palace to see the emperor and empress. Let's dress up our palace and wear that dark green peacock feather gauze garment." Yes. Fengjia from Changle can enter the palace directly without getting off or walking, which is authorized by the imperial favor. Flowers as delicate as Changle are afraid of breaking when raised in a greenhouse. As soon as he stepped into the Fengshi palace, Changle saw the emperor and empress sitting on the dragon chair, tears streaming down his face like a broken thread. "Brother. Sister-in-law. Changle has come to see you." The emperor looked at his sister's sad expression and felt a tinge in his heart. "Changle, are you feeling better now?" Changle raised her hand to wipe away her tears, but the emperor was stabbed in the eye by the white cloth wrapped around her hand. "The Wei family has already copied it, so please rest assured and recuperate." Changle shook his head with a stubborn expression in his eyes. "Brother, I want to separate from the governor." The empress frowned and her armored hand swayed up and down unnaturally. "Zhao, isn't it treating you well? Changle just doesn't like the lord and isn't happy to be with him." Changle lowered his head and his voice became lower and lower. "The lord treats me well." The emperor waved his hand without doubt and said, "I will not allow you to leave with Xie Zhao, even though I have agreed to all your other requests." The empress still wanted to speak up and persuade, but the emperor's expression changed and he said, "That's enough." The national teacher stood unintentionally in the corner, as if trying to ease the awkward atmosphere. He walked gently to Changle's side and asked the emperor, "Your Majesty, can I have a conversation with my disciple alone?" The emperor waved his hand and said, "Go ahead." In the imperial garden, Changle pulled on his unintentional sleeve and said with great grievance, "Master, Xie Zhao doesn't allow me to maintain my dignity, but he himself is promiscuous. Today, Xie's daughter waited for him outside our yard for 5 hours. Last time I came out of Wangbei Tower, I saw him go to the brothel. Later, I asked the guards to follow him every day and found out that he would go every 3 to 5 Wuxindo smiled and said, "So, are you trying to get angry with him because you've tasted it?" Changle exclaimed in terror, "No." Unexpectedly, his expression was stern, and his eyes were shrouded in darkness. The crown prince's selection of a concubine is imminent, and it's possible that Xie Zhao is preparing chess pieces to be sent to the Eastern Palace. He said. Changle almost forgot that Xie Zhao is a cunning sycophant. Going to the Eastern Palace to pass people, his plan is not small. Changle Guaner is the Eastern Palace. Where is a place where even cats and dogs can enter? Looking at him thoughtlessly and meaningfully, there is always a sense of unhappiness that something big is about to happen. 3 days later. The Crown Prince's selection banquet for his concubines, the palace prohibition and revival of the entire garden, with towering buildings, ponds, and pavilions, as well as smoke, willows, flowers, and trees everywhere. Crown Prince Li Yuduan sat on the main throne, dressed in a bright yellow and dark-striped dragon robe that accentuated his bravery and handsomeness. However, facing the noblewomen in the garden, his eyebrows and eyes remained indifferent, as if he was not the one to choose a concubine today. Changle is wearing a silk dress with golden threads and butterflies today. The light red dress has soft fur on the wide sleeves, and the large golden phoenix thread at the hem is lifelike, as if it is about to fly out. Li Yu finally had a good color on his face. He quickly stepped down from the main seat to welcome Changle and said, "Auntie. Are you feeling better now?" Changle also smiled happily and said, "It's okay. Little rascal, don't even come to see your aunt." Li Yu felt a bit melancholic. "My mother said that my aunt is now married, so she wants me and my second brother to pay attention to our propriety." Changle and Li Yu have a great relationship since childhood. Although Li Yu is a few years older than Changle, the two have never been separated. Changle nodded, calculating in his heart another reason for separation. The Empress has also arrived, and who else can be the beautiful man following behind who is lifting his skirt, not the husband who killed 1,000 swords like Changle. Changle calmly scanned Xie Zhao with an expressionless expression, nodded with the Empress, and then turned around to take the Crown Prince to the main seat. "That's really great. Yesterday I went to the brothel, and today I will come to the Deep Palace to serve my old lover." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Changle's dance startles the goose. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Changle's dance startles the goose. The queen has always enjoyed hosting these diverse banquets. She stood in the courtyard and delivered a short message before announcing the banquet. The Crown Prince has a thick roster that detailed the lives and portraits of the women attending the banquet. Today, each of them will present a song and dance to the Crown Prince, and the Crown Prince and Empress will ultimately determine the selected Crown Princess. Li Yu has no interest in these noble women at all. If he really has an interest, would he be willing to let his beloved come here to fight? Grandma Rong reported loudly, "First, the legitimate daughter of the Xie family, Xie Zhao. I saw Xie Zhao dressed in Duanhuang's unique costumes, slowly walking towards the main hall. With a sound of elegant music, she danced with the flying goddess, swaying her water snake waist, and copper bells wrapped around her wrists, ringing step by step, like a graceful saint. Even a righteous gentleman like Li Yu with a cement-sealed heart couldn't help but take a second glance." The queen smiled kindly and looked at Xie Zhao with admiration in her eyes. At some point, there was a peculiar exotic fragrance added to the air. With Xie Zhao swaying water sleeves fluttering in the courtyard. Changle took a serious sniff and frowned. Is this the fragrance of the western regions? Changle looked at Xie Zhao, who was lazily sitting across from him, and sneered. He met his narrow phoenix eyes and said with his mouth, Moonlin fragrance, the governor is really a big shot. Yulin Xiang is a soul-stirring fragrance that has been lost for a long time in the western regions. Rather than being a fragrance, it is more like a medicine. Applying it to a woman's body can make men, women, and children lose their minds, and the effect is extremely strong. It is said that Laozi of the old dynasty was good at using this fragrance to enchant King Zhou of Shang to the point of immortality and death. Changle has excellent medical skills, but she prefers to make poison. This month, she has also refined the linxiang. She spent thousands of gold on buying materials to refine a little bit, and Xie Zhao, in order to be able to pass people into the East Palace, actually applied such a precious treasure directly on Xie Zhao's sleeve. Changle thought of this and unexpectedly ignited another wave of anger. Don't worry. Xie Zhao replied with a mouthful, feeling a bit anxious, with a slightly stiff expression on his face. Changle's slightly angry expression suddenly burst into a bright smile, like the most seductive spring breeze in sunny spring. At the end of the song, Changle suddenly stood up and applauded. Miss Xie is truly the #1 noblewoman in the capital. Her performance of the Western region's goddess descending to earth dance is truly stunning and stunning. Changle turned to look at the Empress and said coquettishly, Empress-in-law, Changle also wants to dance. The Empress has never been pleased with her arrogant and domineering sister-in-law, but with Xie Zhao's stunning performance before, Changle is now standing tall and showing off. Isn't it just imitating others in the East? The Empress smiled and said, if Changle wants to dance, of course she can. Changle happily lifted her skirt and ran, reciting as she ran, Mammy, please continue to register. I'll come back to the platform and change into dance clothes. Xie Zhao was curious about what medicine was sold in Changle's gourd, and his gaze remained fixed on Changle's elf-like figure, lost in thought. Master, your highness may have intentionally stirred up the situation today. Do you want someone to lock her up? Reminded San Gung from the sideline. Xie Zhao curled his lips and smiled lightly, then raised his hand and said, no need, even after the Moonlin fragrance has been sprinkled, what else can she stir up? Perhaps with the stunning beauty of Xie Zhao, the noblewoman behind her is beautiful, but without a soul. The crown prince only scanned lightly without any lingering gaze. The last person finished showing off, and the nanny was just announcing the end when Changle finally got off the distant phoenix carriage and arrived late. Changle was wearing a colorful neon dress and feather jacket, shining brightly in the sunlight like a rosy glow. She wore a 9-headed phoenix hairpin on her head, with golden dots on her eyebrows. The neon dress and feather jacket followed her footsteps, revealing large patches of snow-white skin on her waist and limbs. Like a proud and noble phoenix. The traditional neon dance music sounded, as if mixed with a touch of elegant orchestral music. It's both vulgar and elegant. She danced like a beautiful butterfly, flipping freely, and the sound of the flute became increasingly urgent. Her figure grew faster and faster with the music. Her jade-like white wrist had 2 shocking wounds, adding a hint of seduction with a bloody smell for no reason. A pair of smoky water eyes, eager to speak, with flowing light dancing, like a phoenix bathing in fire. With the dancing of the waist, a faint fragrance diffused in the air, like the heavenly fragrance beyond the sky, making people feel comfortable when smelling it. Looking at the women dancing gracefully on the dance floor, it was as if they were coated with a layer of gold. At the end of the song, the whole audience fell silent, followed by thunderous applause. Everyone was still reminiscing about the startled glance just now, and had already forgotten the first dancer. Xie Zhao looked into Changle's eyes with love and desire, and only her fluttering dance was in his mind. Changle met Xie Zhao's eyes with desire and love, curled his lips and smiled, I only came to dance for fun in this palace. Sisters, please don't mind. After speaking, he walked towards the empty seat next to the crown prince. Xie Zhao was actually a person who did the right thing. He got up first and walked up to the empress, asking, I wonder which girl the empress and his highness like. Li Yu looked at her aunt's stunning dance and couldn't remember the names of her predecessors. She sighed inwardly that her bloodline was still better than that of the royal family. Look at this palace, the selection banquet was held too hastily this time, so let's choose again next time. The empress was well aware of her son's secret thoughts and even felt annoyed by watching Changle. Okay, then let's prepare well for another election next time. Xie Zhao's calm eyes flashed with a hint of gloom, yes. After the banquet ended, Xie Zhao silently dismissed all the servants behind Changle and followed her to the moon-ranging platform. Lord, what do you mean by this? Xie Zhao took a step forward and leaned down to her ear, sniffing the fragrance of the moon and the forest. Xie Zhao's whole body seemed to be ignited by the seductive smell, and he grabbed the person into his arms and sniffed it fiercely. Changle deliberately didn't push him away and let him indulge. After Xie Zhao's eyes lit up, he slowly turned away with a pair of jade hands. This is the phoenix fragrance that I used to stir up in my palace 2 years ago. I didn't expect it to come in handy today. Changle's smiling eyes seemed to be filled with poison, ignoring the man's increasingly restrained breathing in front of her. Of course, I have added some more ingredients today, more than the potion you gave me. Xie Zhao's whole body was hot and uncomfortable. He wanted to swallow Changle Sheng into his stomach to soothe his body a bit, but he laughed wildly and said, You drugged me, don't you regret it? Although Xie Zhao's eyes were already filled with anger, he still restrained himself and said, Your Highness, aren't you afraid that I will stain you? Changle Guaner, if you dare to insult me, then I will kill you. After speaking, he took out a black golden curved knife, which flashed with a hint of red light and was highly poisonous. I'm not that ruthless, after all, you're a eunuch. How can you detoxify yourself? This medicine will only make you uncomfortable for a few hours at most. Xie Zhao was about to be burned out of reason and said in a hoarse voice, Get out. Changle, on the other hand, took off his robe and exposed a large amount of snow-white skin on his shoulders. He turned around and sat down on the phoenix seat on the platform, saying coldly, The governor is crazy. This is the moon platform, and the person who wants to leave is you. The spinning in Xie Zhao's mind shattered. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Truly being in Laozi is not a man. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Truly being in Laozi is not a man. The spinning in Xie Zhao's mind shattered. Changle was bullied by Xie Zhao on the golden phoenix seat, and his heavy breathing echoed in Changle's ear, making her shiver. Just as he was about to swing his knife to chop at his back, he was grabbed by someone's small hand. Bang dang. The phoenix hairpin and cold weapons fell onto the cold marble floor at the same time, making a crisp sound. The fire in Xie Zhao's eyes slowly materialized and spread to Changle. He only heard Xie Zhao restrain his breath and mutter in Changle's ear, Changle, are you really a man, not an old man? Dripping, a fresh and bloody smell instantly spread in the air. Xie Zhao stabbed the dagger into his shoulder and suddenly pulled it out, causing a sharp pain that restored clarity to his eyes. He didn't turn his head and walked out, only coldly saying, I'm dirty. Changle collapsed on the phoenix throne, his whole body soft and tender, his heart pounding fiercely. There was no way he was as arrogant as before. Okay, Xie Zhao, you have guts. Taking advantage of the cold wind, Changle stayed on the moon platform for several days in a row and, like revenge, moved half of the north tower to the moon platform. A clear male voice came from the main hall. Your Highness, are you throwing a teapot or listening to music today? Changle was dressed in embroidered gold-black gauze, with a faint smile on his face, and coquettishly said, This palace doesn't make a choice. Qinghuan, with a peach blossom on his face, extended his hand and invited Changle to sit over. I wrote a poem for your highness, and your highness sat down to listen. He said the person on the other side also did not show weakness. Then I will play the piano for your highness. Your highness praised my piano skills yesterday as an old friend of hers. The sound of silk and bamboo suddenly sounded, and it was Xie Zhao. He actually bypassed the crowd and started performing first, which made everyone feel a little unhappy. Who wouldn't know if she could be accepted as a face by the princess? She has an ancestral plate and can be considered half a royal person, able to honor her ancestors. Who wouldn't want to soar upwards? For a moment, everyone in the main hall used their skills, one working harder than the other. Changle leisurely sat cross-legged on the phoenix seat, with a face full of enjoyment. Look, this is the taste of money and power. How tempting. There are always good-looking beauties willing to keep pleasing her. Isn't it much better than Xie Zhao, the ghost who only confronts her? However, thinking of Xie Zhao's seductive face, Changle swallowed his saliva. If a beautiful woman is beautiful, she will be beautiful, but if she has thorns, it won't be good. It would be great if Xie Zhao were just a small eunuch, so she could use money and power to lure him into submission. Jian Chui returned from the front hall and looked at the absurdity of the main hall filled with wine pools and meat groves, with an embarrassed expression. The governor has brought a box of jewelry, and I'm just a marquis in the front hall, she said. Changle's eyes flickered with a hint of disgust. I don't see it, I don't accept it. Daisher is a clever person who knows that the princess must have had a conflict with the governor. The two of them are deadlocked in a standoff, but now the governor has made concessions and voluntarily came to give gifts, posing in a low and humble manner. Daisher stepped forward and advised, Your Highness, during this period, the governor has been deliberately passing by the Ran Yutai every day, and those who have intentions have noticed it. If we don't see it again, it may damage the reputation of the princess. Changle waved his hand disapprovingly and said, The heavenly Shah Lone Star in this palace has become a close relative 4 times. Can we still have a good reputation? I have wine today, and I am drunk today. The moon-gathering platform is not the Lord's mansion, he cannot control me. With a blink of an eye, Changle looked at the figure outside and resentfully said, The reputation of this palace is not good, but the reputation of Xie Zhao is good. The last time someone spread rumors about Xie Zhao visiting the Flower Tower, did they? Jiesher's face turned green and white, and she arched her hand and said, We have all spread the news according to your highness's request, but because Lord Xie's reputation is not good, this matter has not caused a splash. The implied meaning is to break the jar and throw it. Changle chuckled and said, Is that right? Isn't our palace a combination of broken jars and broken throws? For a moment, no one in the hall dared to answer. Xie Zhao's cold and restrained voice exploded in the main hall, causing those who read poetry, play the piano, play music, and write to stop moving. I have obtained many treasures from the merchants of the western regions. Isn't the princess's favorite thing to see? Don't you want to see it? Changle looked up and met Xie Zhao's smiling eyes. Changle frowned. Damn it, how many years is Xie Zhao a fox who has been practicing Taoism? What happened a few days ago had no ripple in his eyes. Changle felt uneasy in his heart, but didn't want to lose out. He coldly replied, I can't afford the gift from the governor. I'll take it out and give it to your flower queen. Xie Zhao knew that Changle liked to send people to track him, but he didn't show it on his face. Hua Kuei, how can you have the nobility of your highness? Oh. So where are you more noble than your face? The two of them choked on each other, causing everyone in the room to lower their heads, observe their noses, and hearts, and not dare to take a breath. Xie Zhao's eyes were slightly cold, but the corners of his mouth still curved with a smile. Since the princess has not recovered from the cold, let's continue to rest. The gift is for the princess, and I hope the princess can accept Zhao's kindness. Changle stood up and slowly walked to the side of a box of luxurious jewelry behind Xie Zhao. He took out a peacock stone and carefully examined it. It's indeed a good thing. Then he picked up the 2 candlesticks next to him and threw them directly into the treasure chest. He frowned and sighed, it's a pity. At the bottom of the treasure chest is the precious snowflake cloth that is hard to find in the western regions. It is also an extremely shining presence in Chang'an City, but Changle easily threw away the flame, and the treasure was instantly devoured by the flames. Xie Zhao lifted Changle, who was squatting next to the burning box, and sternly said, "If you're crazy enough, go home. Back. The platform is my home. I'm not going anywhere in this palace." Changle roared, his chest fluctuating violently due to emotional fluctuations. Xie Zhao's eyes were shrouded in darkness, and he said coldly, "Has the princess forgotten? You and I are the emperor's wedding, and you can't let it go if you want to." Xie Zhao looked at the several faces inside who looked at each other with anger and said, "Someone. Bring the princess back to the mansion for the rest of the family to rest and recuperate." A group of fancy fish carrying knives rushed in and quickly surrounded the palace, inexplicably inviting Changle onto the carriage of the governor's mansion. Changle was about to curse, "This palace is a princess. If you dare to touch me, the emperor will not spare you." For the first time, Changle saw the authority of those in power on Xie Zhao's face, which was no less than that of her imperial brother. Xie Zhao threw a jade seal to Changle and said coldly, "The miscellaneous family is your heaven. Don't use your brother as a shield anymore." However, Changle remained silent. Yes, she was used to bullying Xie Zhao and forgot that half of the political power of the Ming Dynasty was in his hands. Even if he was unhappy, it was okay to let the emperor's brother bury himself. She clenched her hands, gritted her back teeth tightly, and paused word by word, "I will follow you in this palace. I hope the people in the north building can let go." Xie Zhao chuckled and said, "You really think I have a good temper? Please." Changle bit his lips and spit out 2 words for a while. Xie Zhao was greatly impressed by her appearance, both angry and amused. "Okay, they can leave. Can your highness go home with me?" Cough. Changle said, "Let's go. Jian Cui, go and inform the imperial brother that the cold in our palace is almost over. Let's go back to the mansion with the governor first." Jian Cui smiled and replied, "Yes," and then walked out of the hall without a trace. This little heartless person. You have 1 vote, I have 1 vote, Zhao will debut tomorrow. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. I can't endure it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. I can't endure it. Governor's Mansion. Changle entered the door without saying a word, like a small doormat, surrounded by guards and maids, and entered the courtyard. Xie Zhao followed behind with a slight squint in his eyes. "Third watch, go to Yunya Opera House and invite a troupe of actors." He raised his hand and called for the shadow guard following behind, pausing again. "We want female actors, but not men." San Gung complained incessantly. Although he was a top-notch dark guard of the Ming Dynasty and someone who didn't blink an eye when killing people, he has been doing odd jobs repeatedly lately. "Master, are you just spoiling Princess Changle like this?" "Pet." Xie Zhao sneered, "What kind of pet is this? If you want to go, go quickly and don't talk too much." Third watch. "Alright, if this doesn't count as love." Coincidentally, Xie Zhao's yard is called Ran Yu Yuan, and the place where Changle lives is called Ran Yu Tai. When Changle stepped into the courtyard, she paid special attention to this plaque. The handwriting felt both unfamiliar and familiar, with a hint of loneliness in its elegance. "This mansion is really boring, it's nothing." Changle lay on the soft collapse, humming a little tune. No one played with her, so she played on her own. On the table next to her was a crystal-clear glass lamp, which played a big role in illuminating the cold and solemn courtyard with a hint of liveliness and color as the sky grew darker. Tired of singing, she raised her hand and picked up a large purple grape that turned red. With her fingers together, she slowly peeled the skin and gently put it into her mouth. She squinted her eyes with satisfaction and said, delicious. Jiansui, is this grape a tribute from the envoys of the western regions? Is there anything else? Yes, if you want to eat, I'll make you eat it every day. Xie Zhao walked in for some time and looked at the things on the table. Glass lamps, 3 plates of fruits, preserved fruits, floral tea, and 1,000 or 2 pieces of ambergris fragrance emanating from the half-moon-shaped incense burner. Xie Zhao carefully commented, I really enjoy it. Changle suddenly fired a bullet and looked around at the maids and guards who were all bowing their heads. She roared angrily, didn't anyone report anyone? What's the use of you? Her eyes rolled and she swallowed her disgust toward Xie Zhao. She chuckled softly, this palace is condescending to reside in this dilapidated place. Shouldn't we seek pleasure in the midst of hardship? Xie Zhao nodded and looked at his dilapidated place. It was indeed quite dilapidated. There was nothing in the yard except for a big tree. It wasn't Changle who brought some rockeries and flower pots over, and this place was like a humble abode. Xie Zhao said, I have purchased a house for you next to me. I hired craftsmen from the palace and you should really like the decoration style. I just finished installing all the furniture a few days ago. If you don't like this place, let's move in tomorrow. Changle listened to the first half of the sentence and just laughed out loud. After listening, his smile froze and he said, what do we mean? Move over. Stay. Xie Zhao was very tall, more than a head taller than Changle. He took a step forward and happened to block Changle's entire body in front of him, feeling very imposing. He bent down and picked up a grape from the table. His beautiful hands carefully peeled off the skin of the large grape, and then under the gaze of Changle, he fed himself and agreed, it's delicious. Changle. Shouldn't a normal script be for you to pluck grapes and feed them to me, and then I refuse? Xie Zhao, that's great. After finishing the grapes, Xie Zhao elegantly wiped the grape juice on her fingers with a handkerchief before looking at Changle's stiff expression and saying, Princess forgot. We got married, you don't want me to go to bed. It's okay, I can wait, but as your lawful husband, I have the right to live under the same roof as you. Changle said, Xie Zhao, you're really good. Then let's move tomorrow. I don't want to stay in this dilapidated yard for a whole day. A group of people suddenly entered outside, beating drums and gongs. The third watch walked to the end with a black line on his face and said, Master, the theater troupe is here. Changle chuckled and said, Xie Zhao, did you invite him? Xie Zhao nodded and said, don't you like it? Aren't we also moving to a new house tomorrow? Let the troupe celebrate for us. A middle-aged woman led by the theatrical troupe, Shi Shiran, walked over and bowed to the two of them. After bowing her head and bowing to them, she said in a sharp voice, I don't know what kind of play does the nobleman like to watch. Changle sat back on the soft collapse and pondered for a while. Both Zhao Jun goes out of the frontier and Yu Meiren are fine. Oh, you guys can watch them. The actor nodded and said, today we only have a playboy, can we cross-talk? Changle frowned and looked at Xie Zhao, who had a cold face on the side. Only Huadan. Changle stopped working, only the woman looked at him. Crazy and annoyed, she finally thought carefully, maybe it was Xie Zhao who wanted to see it. Can you guys play the piano and dance? Actor. Yes. Changle nodded and said, then let's dance. Take a few more people to play music next to you. All the instruments are there. She raised her hand and waved at Daisher. Daisher immediately walked over and leaned down to listen. Take them to pick up the instruments. I remember Lin and June and they all stored them in the warehouse after they left. Butterfly poem. Okay. Xie Zhao's face turned cold for a moment and he said to the servant behind him, serve the dishes. We'll eat them in the yard tonight. Changle didn't feel Xie Zhao's cold face, still humming a tune to himself, looking at the sky and the ants, but not at Xie Zhao. In 15 minutes. The sound of silk and bamboo echoed from far to near, and the dancers slowly danced to the rhythm of the music from afar, walking towards the place where the two of them were sitting. Changle smiled and ate a grape, his eyes filled with disdain and contempt. "Do you like this kind of thing, Lord?" Xie Zhao couldn't help but say, "I don't like it." The servant quickly carried an insulated wooden box into the yard and filled the stone table with dishes. Changle lowered his head and said, "Okay, today we can't get along with Xie Zhao, because all the dishes we served were her favorite dishes." She picked up her chopsticks and began to eat in small bites, without looking up at the dancers. It was boring, not as good as the Xie family's dance. Xie Zhao knocked on the table and said, "Don't like it. Don't look anymore." Changle responded in a muffled voice, "It's not interesting. Tell them to go down. It's better for the beauties to look at the North Tower." Xie Zhao said, "My face is at least 50,000 taels of gold in the sea. You can't even take a glance." Well, the governor not only has a tough life, but also a tough face. Suddenly, there was a rapid sound of footsteps at the entrance of the yard. In the middle of the night, he strode up to Xie Zhao and knelt down, saying, "Master, there's someone in the palace. I want you to come into the palace now." Xie Zhao too didn't lift his head either, "I won't go." In the middle of the night, he leaned down and said something to Xie Zhao's ear. Xie Zhao stood up with a swoop and said, "Your Highness, take your time. I'll go into the palace once, so you don't have to wait for me at night." Changle rolled his eyes and said, "I wish you wouldn't come back." Xie Zhao only replied with a solitary figure. After nightfall, the palace was still very luxurious, with bright candles lit everywhere. Walking to the imperial garden, one could still see the night pool, which was decorated with night pearls, shining this corner luxurious and bright. It was only because of the words of the Empress Dowager that the imperial garden was beautiful, but the night was too dim. Emperor Tianren waved his hand and built this night pool for her. Xie Zhao glanced coldly at the familiar extravagance in the palace and walked to the Golden One Hall. Emperor Tianren threw the pen on the dragon table directly at Xie Zhao's head, but his accuracy was not good, and he threw it off the hook. The pen happened to fall at Xie Zhao's feet. Xie Zhao's face was full of impatience and he said, "Your Majesty, what's the matter with finding me so late?" Emperor Tianren suppressed his anger. He has been clearing the valley for the past few days, so he cannot act recklessly with his liver fire. It's not good. What's going on? Xie Zhao, I don't care about what's going on in the court. If you want to act recklessly, do you want to act recklessly? But are you warning me by killing the Wei Duke's family? Xie Zhao said lightly, "It's my father's fault to raise or not teach. The Wei family has raised such a Zhongshan wolf, and I dare not bind Changle without permission. I can't bear it." Emperor Tianren threw another jade seal, and Xie Zhao turned slightly to block it. He only heard him say with anger, "I, as an elder brother, can tolerate it. You are really unreasonable. Tomorrow is your day off, please go to the Dabaoan temple and reflect on yourself." Xie Zhao. I will comply with the order. End of this chapter.